Good day, good evening, good morning, whatever the time is with you. I know, I know that things since we do things virtually, there's no guarantee that you'll be watching this when it is uploaded. But when you do watch it, um, welcome. Actually, let me welcome you to a series uh, that we are now doing. We are now going to be engaged in. Uh, as Nelson Mandela University's DASM, which for those who do not know it, it's a student movement. We this week we are doing a series on how to study the Bible, and since this is the first episode of it, uh, we are gonna actually answer the question of where does the Bible come from? For Because for you to be able to even want to study the Bible, probably you might even have issues on the Bible itself. You're like, what is this thing that I'm called to do, to study? People assume that I should know this, but what is it? Where does it come from? This little book, my versions, it's written the Holy Bible. Holy Bible. What is it? Others' version will write the Word of God, like the Word of God. Where did God somehow speak this into existence? Did he write it himself? I hear that there are theories about that the Bible was written in stones, and some people then took it down. Many theories of where the Bible comes from, but most of them arise from the fact that we don't actually know what this is. Some theories have come and said that the Bible is a white man's invention. A white man made it to enslave us black people. This entire book, this one book has been fought for by people. Some people have loved it, and some people have, in the same measure, hated this book. It has inspired a lot of people to do great things, but also this book, if we say the truth, has been used to inspire even greater atrocities. So one would want to know, where does it come from? When you open the Bible, the first word, the first passage that you read in the Bible, I would say the preface, it's Genesis chapter 1. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So in the firstly, the book itself doesn't really try to give evidence of about it. It wouldn't be good anyway. I don't think we would take it that much since it comes from it. But that it makes, sorry about that, the video thing. But again, basic assumptions that it makes. For example, it assumes that you believe in God. It assumes that you believe that there must have been a God, because it just writes and says, in the beginning, God created. Doesn't tell you that there's a God. Let's find evidence of it. But I repeat, knowing where the Bible comes from is important, so that you know the source of what you're reading. So, as I said, firstly, most of the misconceptions of the Bible stem from the fact that a lot of people do not know what this is actually. A lot of advertisements might have distorted it. But the word Bible comes from the word biblio, which in other languages it actually just means the book. Book. Bible, biblio means book. So Holy Bible means holy book. We'll get to whether should we say actually is it holy or not. We've got a long series of that. But the Bible is basically a library of other books. This is a library of many books. This is not actually one book. It has about 67, if I'm not mistaken, 67 books in it. These are distinct books written by different men. You will hear of the Old and the New Testament. It's actually just a cutting of the book, of the many types of book here. There are like 67 books in this Bible, in the Bible, written by different men. There are about 40 recognized known authors of the Bible. So the Bible wasn't written by one man. It wasn't written in some cave somewhere by someone whom we do not know. Some of the writers or authors of the books in the Bible, so the collection of the books that are in the Bible, some of the authors are actually people who are known in history, people who lived. For example, one of the authors is King David. Everyone knows that despite you can disapprove a lot of things, but in history it is documented. We know that King David, the figure King David, actually did live. King David, King Solomon, those were people who did exist. Also, Paul is in the New Testament is a world-renowned person who is known. He's known in history that he must have existed for him to have written these things. So a Bible, one collection of books written by many different authors, about 40 of them. Some of them have never met each other, not even once. They lived in different lifetimes. The span of the Bible from the first book that was written to the last one, it's about 1,500 years. That's more than a millennium. So a collection of books that were written in a period of about 1,500 years. So that's why it then becomes a source of history, a certain source of history, whether you will believe that all of those authors were lying or not, we are not there. But 1,500 years. First one written by Moses, Genesis, first 5 books of the Bible written by Genesis. It is believed he lived about 1,500 years before the last book that was written by John, who claims was the disciple of Jesus Christ, John, which is the book Revelation. He writes it in the island of Patmos. Now the Bible, now that's the span of the Bible. In the Bible, you'll find that the Bible is similar to other known holy books by other religions. We'll know that the Bible is used by Christians. For example, the Jews, the Torah contains Some of the books that are in the Bible mostly contains the Old Testament of the Bible, which is the Hebrew Decalogue. Uh, you will have your Genesis there, up all the first 5 books of Moses, which are known as the Law, the Torah, which is the law. The Jews hold these books as sacred books. You take Moses as a founder of the Israelite nation. They hold these books as sacred. Then you, on top of those books, you will have books written by Hebrew prophets, which is you have your Isaiah, your Malachi, your Jeremiah. Also, the Jews believe on these books to be wholly inspired books. And that word inspired, in the Bible, funny enough, I think it's in First Peter chapter 1. It says holy men were inspired to write these books. So that's the belief. The belief that the people who wrote them were inspired by God to actually read them. That's why then they hold a certain authority. But we'll come back to that. So as I was saying, the prophets, Hebrew prophets, are there, and some other authors like who would be known in the history of the Hebrews or the Jews. King David, as I mentioned, also part of the authors of the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament was written before Jesus Christ actually came. That is, before Jesus Christ, the man who claimed that he's Jesus Christ, he's the Messiah, he's the person that the Jews have been waiting for. Before that guy came, the Old Testament was already written and done by the authors. So it kind of comes in the middle. Oh no, I wouldn't say on the later part of this 1,500 year history. So Jesus Christ is born around this time. It's still disputed, around 4 BC or close to 80. He's born around that time, and he well, whether you believe it or not, belief is he lived, he died, and then his disciples claimed that he rose again from the dead. So the New Testament starts to document the life of Jesus. So after the whole Torah thing, the Hebrew version of the Bible, then starts the New Testament with the story of Jesus and him. The 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they deal specifically with the life of Jesus. These were people who were documenting the life of Jesus. I think 2 of them, if I'm not mistaken, 2 of them were actually his disciples, were the people who lived with him, ate with him, drank with him, walked with him. So they document his miracles and his life. And if you notice the life of Jesus, the gospel document in detail more when he was older, when he had already started his public ministry, because that is what was known. Then you'll have another author who is Luke on the 4 Gospels. Luke wasn't a disciple of Jesus Christ, but he's someone who actually went and researched about Jesus Christ. He does say this, why he wrote Luke. He was researching about Jesus Christ. And then Luke also write Acts, which is the Acts of the Apostles. So he's someone who we, in our modern day, we would claim he's a historian. He went and documented to the best of his ability the things that he had about Jesus Christ. Now that is written about not about 3 decades after Jesus Christ claimed resurrection. You see, and written in a time when people who knew Jesus Christ were still alive, so they could dispute whether this is right or this is wrong. And then you go to Paul and John up to Revelation. But now, so which means the New Testament, it's newer than the Old. But as time went, people started to reverence these books, these new books of the Testament, and to take them as inspired books, because one, they believed the author. Now this all rests on the author. The author, you believe that the author must have been inspired. In our culture, we have what we call umntu oligqirha. They call him in English a witch doctor, which I'm sometimes not comfortable to use that word. But igqirha is someone whom we believe that the ancestors speak with him, and since the ancestors speak through him, we sort of believe that what he says is not coming from him. So then we take it with certain type of authority. So that's the Bible. So this author, we'll look at the author and then we'll look and say, I think this must have been a good man. I don't think he would lie. So what he's saying, if he says it is from the Bible, it is from God, then we believe it. So it's inspired in that way. So now, therefore, as time went, people started to collect these books, and now today we have the Bible is complete, up to Revelation at this point, of which we, most of the history of the Bible is written by Jews, and it was documenting a history of the people whom God had chosen this type of nation, that he will show the nations, and he will bless the nations through them by actually reflecting what a true nation that is led by God behaves and is like. So Abraham is called by God. Now Abraham is the father of the Jews, but also I would say Abraham is a founder of many religions. For example, Muslims will also go back and trace up to Abraham. Muslims, Jews, and Christians, because the belief is that God called Abraham in his home, and called him and said, I want you to become I'm going to make a great nation out of you, and I'm going to bless the world, the families of the world through your seed. So this now happens from Abraham's time. Then we learn of the things that how God dealt with this nation systematically. Now the question then would come, which would say, if that's the case, wasn't then God present in other nations? Because there's an envy. Sometimes the races, other races want to see themselves in the Bible, want to be reflected in the Bible. And I want at this moment to just dispel a certain type of notion that the Bible is a European thing. It's not, the Bible doesn't document the history of Europeans, but documents the history of the Hebrew people, which were Israelites who lived in the Middle East. But yes, God was present in other nations, but the difference between the Hebrews and other nations was that they actually documented those encounters with God. Almost every nation on earth does believe in God in one form or the other. For example, if in Noah, then Noah's flood, you'll find that many nations do have a catastrophic flooding of the earth story, things like that. So there are common and similarities between the Hebrews and other nations, but we understand that they happened independently. Also, one would ask, and we are South Africans, I am specifically Xhosa, so one would ask, where are the Xhosas in the Bible? When the Xhosas written in the Bible? We may discuss that some other time, but something that we would note is that most of Black people, for example, lived up north in Africa. We have migrated downwards through Africa a bit later. That is part of our history. And Ethiopians are written about in the Bible. But yeah, so other nations probably did have encounters with God, but whatever those encounters were, they happened independent because the Bible was more focused on the history of the Jews. Now, with the arrival of Jesus Christ and his resurrection, and Jews killing Jesus Christ, and then others claiming that this guy woke up, and the other ones were like, no, we don't preach that. Christianity was born, because Christianity, the word Christians, it's actually a slang word where they actually dissing people who believed on Jesus Christ. Now, the disciples of Jesus and Paul took Christianity to Gentiles, other nations. So now this information, this well of information that the Jews had, was then given to other nations. Paul preached, for example, in Italy, in Rome, and Romans got this word, and now it's spread throughout Europe. But then there was a point where the Christian world wanted to separate itself from Jews. So they separated themselves from Jews, created their own system, but this knowledge was then preserved throughout. We will one day probably go through the fact that they killed then the Christians themselves started to kill other Christians for wanting to believe only on the Bible. That is the time of the Reformation, Martin Luther type of vibes. So there was a lot of bloodshed in Europe for this Bible, because back then Christianity, or the religion, believed that only the priests and the pastors are supposed to read the Bible. Laymen are not supposed to read the Bible because they can't understand it. Because laymen would probably find faults in the priests when reading the Bible. So it was fought for. People died for it, and Martin Luther was one of the great people who were able to rewrite it in German, in the language of their native language, so that people can be able to understand it. Because it was only in Greek, Hebrew, and it also for the Italians only. So Latin, but it was able to be translated to other versions. So by the time the Bible arrives in Africa, of which I'm South African. In South Africa, they arrived around 1652. In West Africa, we will know that Europeans arrived a bit earlier, around 1400s. But by the time this arrives in Africa, white people have been fighting, or Europeans have been fighting about this book for years. And now it has arrived, and people are skeptical because of who it arrived with. But the history of it, the origin of the Bible, is a well documented thing that cannot be disputed. There is zero evidence that someone wrote this in some cave and gave it in order to control certain people. Who, if we're going to blame people, we're going to blame the collectors of the Bible, not the authors, because the authors did not even know themselves that they are actually writing the Bible. If you were to wake them up, they would be shocked that their writing survived this long and that they were actually documented, and we today carry them as a holy book. So we do believe that it is inspired by God and that this is the word of God. God has been trying to communicate with human beings ever since our first parent Adam ate from that tree and started to run away from God. And God has been sounding in the garden and saying, Adam, where are you? He's been trying to find us. And he has spoken to other people through visions. And those people, we have called them prophets or inspired people. He does speak in also nature. God is revealed in nature. If you study it, you will find the essence and the lessons that God has always been wanting to portray to us. But this is the ready, sure word. This is in nature. Maybe you because you have your own variables and your own perception, you might not get it. You might get the wrong message, and maybe you might not get a vision, and maybe you might not have access to a prophet. But we have an access to the Bible, to the word of God, in our hands. Some people died so that we may have this, and that's not an exaggeration. Millions of people died so that future generations can have this. The value of the wisdom here cannot be measured by monetary value. Bibles are cheap, but this is a guide to life here on earth and the life to come when we shall enter heaven, when we shall enter eternity. This is the guide to it. If you wanted a manual for your life, this is it. You will find everything that is needed in the Bible. You want to find the meaning of life? You'll find a book called Ecclesiastes written by King Solomon, one of the wisest men, when he was trying to find the purpose of life, and he would be saying, I've observed that everything seems to be useless. Generations come and go. The sun will still rise tomorrow and go down, no matter what happens. All is vanity. He was trying to find the meaning of life. Those things, you'll find them here. Do you want to read about history? Do you want to know your origin? Where do you come from? You will find it in here. You want to hear words of encouragement. You want motivation. You find it in here. This is a collection of the wisdom of spanning from 1,500 years. And as we continue, we read and as we hear and we discover how to actually read this Bible in this new series started by the Society's DASM, NMU, which is Seventh-day Adventist Student Movement. We hope that we'll be able to give you pointers in being able to study this for yourself. You don't need a minister, you don't need anyone, but for yourself. You can study it. We will gladly do this for you. And funny enough, things that have value are actually for free. So I hope if there's anyone, this has been helpful for you, and hope that in your new journey, or that you start, or that you're going to continue with, you don't forget this book that has all the wisdom you need. Thank you.